everyone, I'm Andrea Meyer. I'm the head of the Long Island Collection at the East Hampton Library, and the Long Island Collection is our special collections and local history archive that really focuses on Long Island, its people, and its places. I hope you are all staying healthy and staying as safe as you can and doing what you can to try to stay home right now as much as possible. We know it's a really difficult time for everybody, and we're all looking forward to having you back in the library as soon as possible. We'd like to try to bring you as much of the library as possible, so I thought I would try to take you on a little bit of a tour of the exhibits that my department put together in the front cases of the library. So these cases are in the lobby and they will still be up when we get back, but I thought it might be nice for you to have a little bit of time to focus on what's really there. So the first case I'd like to share with you is actually our exhibit called Who Would Have Guessed These Items Are at Your Local Library? And this exhibit sort of came together when my colleagues and I kept finding items when we were helping patrons that we were really surprised were just in a local library. We'd realize, oh wait, this is really cool. Like, people have no idea this is here. Nobody's coming in to request this because they have no idea that it's something that they should be looking for here. Or it just was kind of amazing or fascinating that it was this strange, old, historic, interesting item. So we wanted to kind of draw a little bit of attention to them. And that's where this exhibit came from. The first item you would typically see as you approach this case is actually a large nautical chart along the back wall of this case. This chart is a chart of Gardiner's Island. It's a nautical map that shows the area around Gardiner's Island. It shows the shorelines, and it also shows a little bit of the depths of the water. Additionally, the cartographer Joseph de Beers made a little note or point where the HMS, His Majesty's ship, the Cerberus, which was a British Navy ship, had wrecked in 1777 near Montauk. And what a lot of people don't realize is that there was a lot of British naval activity during the Revolutionary War in this area, particularly around Gardiner's Island. So this map sort of gives a little bit of a hint or a little bit of a taste of what that would have been like and what the waters were like. If you continue looking at the exhibit, probably the next item you would see would be an item on your left-hand side. It's a book. This book, to me, was ridiculously exciting when I found it. First, because I had no idea it was an 1806 dictionary. And second, because I remember having to memorize for history class that Noah Webster's dictionary was from 1828. And to me, anytime you find something in the primary sources that contradicts what most people know or kind of adds information, it's a really interesting, fascinating moment in research and in archives. But also, when you think about Noah Webster working on this dictionary for over 22 years just in his own lifetime, and all the work and effort that he put into defining all these words, I think it, for me, spoke to a little bit of why Merriam-Webster was such an enduring source. And it is the same Webster's dictionary that evolved into what we know and use still online today. Continuing along the shelf, the next item that you see, this dark, long item, would have actually been from the Hand family. The Hand family, more specifically, the Captain David Hand family, and yes, I do mean that Captain David Hand with all the wives, who was probably the inspiration for James Fenimore Cooper's Natty Bumppo and the Leather Stocking Tales, who was a Revolutionary War hero and a whaling captain and all sorts of colorful things. So that Captain Hand, he initially lived in Poxabog, which, if you don't know where that is, it would have been probably near Sagaponack, kind of near the Wainscott-Sagaponack border. And the item here is actually a rock that was turned into what's called a pestle, and a pestle would have been used with a mortar and pestle, where you would have kind of mashed things like this. People would probably only use it to make guacamole today, but at the time it would have been a really important tool to smash up things like herbs and different nuts and seeds and flowers and things like that. It was a very important tool. And kind of a KitchenAid or Cuisinart sort of gadget for the 1750s kitchen of sorts. We do believe this item's from about 1755. We have a little bit of a family legend that comes with this story, and I have nothing to really document this story besides the family tradition that this is why the Hand family moved their house from Poxabog to Sag Harbor. Supposedly, when the Hands were living in Poxabog, Zervia Hand, one of the wives of David Hand, overheard yelling outside her house, and she went out and basically intervened in a domestic violence incident between two Native Americans, a Native American couple, and the man supposedly had this rock in his hands that he was threatening the wife with, and the wife, or the female Native American, Mrs. Hand stepped in between the Native American lady and the Native American man and grabbed the rock out of the Native American man's hand. And this rock was turned by the family into this kitchen tool. Supposedly, the Hand family felt very unsafe in the neighborhood after this incident, and this is what prompted them to move. We really have no evidence that that's actually what happened beyond this family tradition, but, it's not something that we would necessarily have documentation to support or contradict. To me, what's really fascinating is that we have something that David Hand would have touched, something that was converted from rock or stone or made more useful. And really, I don't have all that many chances to interact with 1750s kitchen appliances, and I think it's really cool to have like a Cuisinart from 1755 sitting in the library, even if it's not exactly, electrical empowered. If you continue looking at the exhibit, the next item on the shelf is an 1818 play. This is the play The Fall of Tarquin or Brutus, which played a really significant role in launching John Howard Payne's career. John Howard Payne is the American composer who wrote Home Sweet Home, and when he wrote those words, it kind of helped him take off and really made a name for himself. And that's something that is celebrated still at Home Sweet Home Museum across the street from the library in East Hampton. John Howard Payne came from the local area. He was an East Hamptonite before he kind of entered the national stage in the theater world. And I think it's really special to have something that's this old. This version of Brutus would have been performed in London. This is the version that was used at the Drury Lane Royal Theatre. And we have some other items related to John Howard Payne, but this one is really special to me because it's a text that would have been, something that he might have looked at in his lifetime, or a version that he probably would have felt familiar and comfortable with. If you continue across this shelf, we actually have an item in the far right corner that has something to do with the item in the far left corner. Both items are connected to the Onderdonk family. What I forgot to tell you when I started talking about the items on the shelf is that the item in the far left corner, this dictionary from Noah Webster, was actually owned by a guy named Joseph Onderdonk. And one of his basically cousins or like great uncles or something like that owned a paper mill in Roslyn, New York. That paper mill would have been located kind of near where the post office is and near the Bryant Library, in that sort of downtown area. And in 1790, when George Washington sort of did his victory tour of Long Island, he stopped off in Roslyn to see the new paper mill that the Onderdonks were operating. We do know that he stopped at the Onderdonk paper mill. We do know that he was very interested in how paper was made, and some accounts claim that he did make some sheets of paper at the Onderdonk paper mill. This item was supposedly one of the pieces of paper that was made at the Onderdonk mill. Now, to be honest with you, I'm not entirely convinced that that is accurate. I don't really have any way of proving exactly what sheets George Washington made, if any, and I think it would have been difficult to keep that straight. Plus, the issue really is that if you look at this item closely, you can see that this story is given to us by Morden Pennypacker, who was the Long Island Collection's founder. And unfortunately, Morden Pennypacker loved a good story almost more than he loved the actual truth of an affair, which makes doing some of our local history very challenging because Morden Pennypacker knew how to add all the drama in. Regardless of whether or not George Washington printed this particular sheet, it is a sheet that would have been printed at the Onderdonk Mill. It does match some of the watermarks and other information that we have about it, and it probably would have been printed around the time of George Washington's 1790 visit. So that alone makes it kind of interesting, and I think the history of us as a country learning to develop our own mills and learning to develop our own industry is really important and interesting, because that wasn't something that we were allowed to do very much of when we were a colony. If you continue to the bottom shelf in the left corner, you will see an item that's brown and has like kind of a round brownish thing attached at the bottom. That brownish thing is paper mache. This document is the official appointment of our New York congressional delegation in 1782 by the governor of New York. That governor was George Clinton. New York was still under British occupation at that point. At least most of New York was. If you look at the document carefully, you will see that it appoints a man by the name of James Duane, a man by the name of John Moran Scott, William Floyd of Mastic, Ezra Lumadou of Robbins Island, and the Lumadou family in Sag Harbor. He's related to them as well. And probably most significantly for most people, this document also appoints Alexander Hamilton to his first term in Congress. So when he is leaving Washington's staff and decides to go into Congress, he does this before the war is over. So this document's dated October 25th, 1782, so it's about almost a year after his triumphant victory at Yorktown, but before the war is really fully over. So it's a very interesting time in the history of New York and America in general. And the round thing at the bottom is a paper mache copy of the Great Seal of the State of New York, which probably also reflects the availability of some metals at the time in New York. There would not have been a lot of metal available that wasn't being used by the Army or wasn't being used for coinage. So they tried to make it decorative and fancy with a really nice, neat handwriting and this paper mache seal of New York. In the middle of the bottom shelf of this case, you will see a map. It's a colorful map. It was done in 1757 by a Parisian cartographer named Bellin. It's significant that the cartographer was French because this map marks all these different empires in the colonies in North America right around the time of the French and Indian War. And what you see if you look closely along near where you'd see the Appalachian Mountains, you see all these western expansions of territory, and you see how the French empire claims are kind of running up along the western ends of some of the New England, New York, some of the English colonies along the eastern seaboard. You will also note, if you look very closely at Long Island, which is really cool for us, is that you see Montauk Point marked, you see Huntington marked, and you see Southampton Town marked, or Southampton Village, which is a really interesting sense of how important these places were, that they were known in other countries this early. If you continue along the shelf, the last item shown here is actually another map. It's a very different kind of map. It records what was being presented at the 1939 World's Fair. You see items that are, locations that are part of all the different displays and interpretation that was going on there. And you also get a little bit of a sense looking through this souvenir booklet that this map is part of, exactly how much electricity and modern technology is being put on display in 1939 in Flushing. The 1939 World's Fair was also a very significant time and place for Morton Pennypacker, our founder, because he was able to show off so much of his collection and his work and sort of focus on Long Island's history. So it was really a big moment for him, but from our perspective, it's also really interesting to see what was kind of the big technology for the time. We do have a few more cases, and I'm looking forward to being able to share them with you while we're all home, but I hope if you have any questions or if there's something that you'd like a different view or a better view of in this exhibit, we can try to share any images we do already have with you. We do have some other images of this material, and we can probably try to answer any questions that you have related to this material, or if you have questions about other things, I really encourage you to reach out. Our emails are all on the Long Island Collection section of the Long Island History section of the East Hampton Library website. I can be reached at Andrea, Andrea, at easthamptonlibrary.org. And we, are certainly interested in trying to support any historical research or other needs that you might have while you're home. We do have access to everything we've previously scanned, and I would encourage you to also check out our digital Long Island installation, which has plenty of buried treasure of its own. Hopefully I'll see you again shortly for another case in the near future. Bye everybody, stay healthy.